Shadows flickered along the tall walls of an empty boardroom. Thick curtains were drawn, shielding the moonlight, while a single lamp burned low on the polished table. In the corner, hidden by the gloom, was a man pacing back and forth. His breathing was ragged, as though his heart was in battle with his mind. On the surface, he was every bit the confident, powerful CEO who ran a major corporation. But in that private moment, he seemed like a man in turmoil, gripped by some haunting secret he had not yet found the courage to face. A letter lay on the table, edges bent from anxious fingers. Its contents, scribbled in a frantic hand, threatened to unravel everything he had built. The letter spoke of betrayal, fear, and a final desperate choice that could change his life forever if revealed. No one would guess that a single sheet of paper could shake the foundation of such a powerful man's world. His empire, his wealth, and even his future with the woman he loved were at risk, set to crumble if the message reached the wrong eyes. In the hallway outside, footsteps slowed. Soft taps of heeled shoes paused at the door. He held his breath, listening as she stood on the other side. His pulse thundered in his ears. Any second now, she might open that door and discover him, trembling under the weight of secrets he never wanted her to know. A single motion of the doorknob would bring him face to face with the woman he cherished, and that moment might set off a chain of events that neither of them could stop. He had never been more afraid. If she learned what truly happened all those years ago, would her love die on the spot? Would she walk away from him, taking with her the only light he had ever known in a life of cutthroat business deals and lonely nights? Or would they find the strength to hold on to each other and fight the shadows of the past together? For a tense moment, the door did not budge. Then, with a soft sigh, the footsteps retreated, leaving him alone again. He released the breath he had been holding. But the letter still lay there, an ugly reminder that not everything was perfect in his world. He shut his eyes, letting the silence swallow him. He had never longed for someone's comforting touch more than he did right then. Outside that room, a night of unforgettable romance was about to unfold. But here, in this hushed, restless space, something dark lingered. A choice waited for him, a choice that could either destroy his chance at happiness or test the strength of a love he could no longer live without. Chapter 1. Glimpses of a Dream. Alexander Wright, CEO and founder of Wright Innovations, was known to most people as a smart, dashing young businessman. His charm had opened many doors, and his keen sense for emerging markets had turned him into a millionaire before he was 30. He seemed to have everything: money, power, and a dynamic public image. People who watched him from afar never guessed how lonely he often felt, or how he used work as a shield to keep his deepest fears hidden. Helen Carter was a rising star in the marketing department of Wright Innovations. She was bright-eyed, with a gift for words and a natural grace that attracted people to her. Yet her gentle spirit masked a fierce determination. She believed in honesty and kindness above all else, qualities that had helped her navigate a corporate environment with grace. Neither Helen nor Alexander had planned on crossing paths beyond work meetings, but life had a way of drawing two souls together when the time was right. That was the case the afternoon she dropped a folder of files outside the elevator. Without hesitation, Alexander stooped to help gather the scattered papers. He handed her the documents. Their eyes met, and something shifted in both of them. She felt a soft spark in her chest, something new and strange, like a bird fluttering its wings. For Alexander, a faint warmth surfaced beneath the layers of stress that usually filled his mind. He offered a small, kind smile. She returned it, feeling a twinge of curiosity and hope. It was the simplest of beginnings, just a moment of shared courtesy. Neither expected that the days ahead would lead to stolen glances, shy greetings, and the trembling possibility of something profound that might bind them together. Chapter 2. Unspoken Confessions. Despite the strict hierarchy within the company, Alexander began to notice Helen more and more. He admired her creative approach to campaigns. The energy in her eyes shone through in every project she touched. She was driven, yet she did not push her ideas with arrogance. Whenever their paths crossed, an unspoken recognition passed between them. Helen had heard stories of Alexander's brilliance and the fearless way he took chances in business. She had also heard rumors of a murky past. Some said he had grown up poor, others that he had been rejected by his father, and still others whispered that he carried an old scar on his heart. But nobody knew the whole truth. Though her interest in him was growing, Helen did not entertain foolish hopes. He was her boss, after all. Still, she could not help noticing how kind he was to her in small ways. He greeted her personally whenever he passed her office. Sometimes, during team gatherings, she would catch him looking her way. When their gazes met, he would give a soft nod that made her heart flutter. She tried to keep her feet on the ground. Office romances were risky, yet every time she felt his presence near, she sensed a magnetic pull. And so, one late evening, when most people had gone home, she found herself lingering near the break room. He walked in, looking surprised to see her there so late. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed softly, shining down on the table where she was standing with a cup of tea. "You're still here?" he asked, voice calm. Helen nodded, hiding her nerves with a small smile. "I had some campaign ideas that needed final touches. I don't like leaving things half done." He took a step closer, leaning against the counter. "That's what I like about you. Your dedication is amazing." Heat rose in her cheeks. She looked into her tea, not sure how to respond. Alexander cleared his throat. "It's good you care about your work, but you should take time for yourself, too. Overworking can take a toll." She dared to glance up and found him watching her with genuine concern. The gesture was so different from the cold and distant image many CEOs projected. She took a small sip of tea, trying to calm her racing heart. "I'll keep that in mind. Thank you." He smiled then, a soft curve of lips that made her heart stutter. In that moment, the hum of the fluorescent lights faded for her, and the world felt smaller, almost intimate. Chapter 3. First Stirrings of Something Deeper. The next few weeks passed in a blur of morning meetings, strategy sessions. Their professional lives continued, yet beneath the routine, an undercurrent pulsed between them. Alexander found reasons to involve Helen in discussions that might usually be handled by other managers. He valued her input, and she proved her skill time and again. Helen did not fail to notice the spark in his eyes whenever they exchanged ideas. They played off each other's suggestions, finishing each other's sentences, and finding hidden angles that no one else in the room thought of. Their synergy went beyond mere collaboration. It was as if they shared a wavelength. When the day's hustle ended, Alexander often found himself longing for her presence. He stayed late, telling himself it was to catch up on paperwork. But when she also stayed late, he felt a sense of thrill he had not experienced in years. Over cups of coffee and unspoken feelings, they grew closer, step by step, word by word. One evening, Helen got stuck on a complex marketing strategy that required the approval of multiple departments. She was still at her desk when midnight approached, rubbing her tired eyes. Suddenly, she saw a figure stop by her office door. Alexander stood there, tie loosened, jacket draped over his arm. "You're still here," he said gently, a faint smile playing on his face. She let out a soft laugh. "I can't go home until I finish this, or else it'll stare at me all night." He set down his jacket on the back of a nearby chair. "Need any help?" Helen's heart skipped a beat at the offer. It was rare for a CEO to involve himself in the details, But that night, he sat beside her, scanning documents, giving insights, and correcting a few numbers. Their hands brushed once when he took a page from her. Even that small contact sent a thrill through Helen's skin. Time passed without them noticing. By the time they finished, the city lights had grown dim, and the office was steeped in quiet. As they stood to leave, Alexander walked her to the elevators. There was a hush between them, filled with questions neither had the courage to ask. But something in his gaze told her what words could not. He was drawn to her. She felt the same. Just before parting, he lifted her hand gently, as if about to kiss it, then paused. With a shy nod, he let her go. The elevator doors slid shut, leaving him standing there, a small smile on his lips, while she was carried down to the lobby with a heart thrumming like a drum. Chapter 4. Coffee Dates in the Shadows. They began to share early morning coffees, always with an unspoken pact to keep things discreet. Helen knew the delicate nature of office gossip. She did not want anyone to think she was receiving special treatment, or that her achievements were due to something other than her talent. Alexander, too, had to consider the image of his company. But they could not hide their growing connection completely. One day, while waiting for him in the cafe near the office, Helen noticed a few curious stares from coworkers who happened to be there. She tried to appear casual, stirring her latte as her mind raced. When Alexander arrived, he greeted her politely. They kept the conversation strictly professional for the first few minutes, talking about upcoming projects and deadlines. Then the moment they sensed no one was paying attention, their voices grew softer, the barrier of formality slipping away. They laughed about silly things, the last campaign fiasco in a rival company, a funny story from her childhood that she was reminded of during a meeting, and discovered pieces of each other's lives bit by bit. Alexander found her sense of humor refreshing, and Helen found his quiet thoughtfulness charming. She was struck by how normal he was in private, despite his position and wealth. As the days stretched into weeks, these moments became a cherished routine. Even the staff at the cafe seemed to sense the subtle spark between them, giving them friendly winks as they ordered. The city outside, with its rumbling traffic and bustling crowds, faded whenever they were together, as if time itself slowed in respect for their blossoming bond. Chapter 5. An Unexpected Setback. Just when their shared happiness began to bloom, an unexpected problem rocked the company. A competitor threatened to release a similar product that clashed with one of Wright Innovation's flagship lines. The board was on edge, stockholders grew nervous, and rumors spread like wildfire. Alexander, faced with the possibility of losing market share, felt the pressure closing in. Meetings multiplied, phone calls rang day and night, and urgent press conferences demanded his attention. He barely had time to breathe, let alone see Helen outside of stolen coffee breaks that now felt far too brief. She noticed the worry weighing down his shoulders and saw the sleepless nights etched beneath his eyes. Concern ate at her, but there was only so much she could do as a marketing specialist. She offered her help in strategy sessions, but the rest was up to Alexander and his high-level executives. One late evening, she found him in the boardroom after everyone else had left, slumped in a chair, staring at charts and graphs that refused to reveal a solution. Without a word, she brought him a cup of tea and placed it on the table. He looked at her, exhaustion plain on his face, but also gratitude. "You should go home," she whispered gently. "It's late." He smiled a little. His voice cracked from hours of conversation. "I will. I just need to figure out a plan for tomorrow's press statement." Helen nodded, then hesitated. Carefully, she placed a hand over his. "You will solve this. I believe in you." Her words, simple as they were, touched something in him. He looked down at her hand covering his and felt a renewed sense of determination. She offered him an anchor, a reminder that he was more than a corporate figure. He was a person deserving of care, of love. Chapter 6. A door opens. The crisis forced Alexander to make a decisive move. He arranged a groundbreaking partnership with an overseas tech giant, surprising everyone, including his own board members. The bold decision saved their product, revitalizing the company's outlook. Within days, the stock prices bounced back, and the wave of panic subsided. With the storm behind him, Alexander realized how Helen had been his quiet support throughout. Her faith in him gave him strength. He wanted to show her that he did not just appreciate her professionally, he cared for her deeply. So he invited her to a fundraiser gala. It was a large event hosted by the city's elite, filled with influential people from different industries. Normally, Helen would have been in the background, writing speeches or preparing marketing material. But this time, Alexander wanted her by his side as his date. Her heart skipped a beat when she received his formal invitation. She questioned if it was appropriate, but he reassured her by explaining that bringing an employee to a public event was not unusual, especially if her involvement was relevant to the company's recent success. But they both knew it was more than that. On the evening of the gala, Helen dressed in a graceful midnight blue gown that flowed around her ankles. She stepped out of her modest car and approached the grand venue with butterflies in her stomach. Flashing cameras and the press lined the entrance, capturing the arrival of every high-profile guest. Alexander was waiting for her inside, wearing a sleek black tuxedo. The moment he saw her, his expression brightened. He walked toward her, the surrounding crowd seeming to fade into the background. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice warm. She smiled, cheeks flushing. "Thank you. You look very handsome, too." His eyes flickered with something beyond mere politeness, and for a moment she forgot about the crowd and the cameras. He offered his arm, and she took it, allowing him to guide her into the grand ballroom. Chapter 7. The ball begins. Chandeliers sparkled above them. Tables draped in fine linens surrounded a large dance floor. Gentle music played, and the clink of wine glasses resonated through the air. The city's wealthy and influential mingled in small clusters, engaged in polite conversation and deal-making. Helen felt a little overwhelmed, but Alexander stayed close, making sure she was included in conversations. He introduced her to other CEOs and prominent figures, always giving her credit for her role in the company's marketing success. She felt a sense of pride and gratitude for the trust he placed in her. Later in the evening, as the music softened, couples began to move on to the dance floor. Alexander turned to her and offered his hand, a question in his eyes. She placed her hand in his, and he guided her gently through the crowd. Though she had never waltzed in such a grand setting, Alexander's quiet confidence calmed her nerves. He pressed one hand against her waist and clasped her hand with the other. The two of them glided, step by step. For a minute Helen closed her eyes, letting the music and the closeness of his body fill her senses. She breathed in his subtle cologne and felt the warmth of his touch through the delicate fabric of her gown. Nothing else mattered. It was just them, moving in harmony. When the dance ended, the crowd applauded, though she barely heard it over the beating of her own heart. Alexander gazed at her, breath slightly uneven, and she saw the unspoken longing in his eyes that mirrored her own. Chapter 8. Confessions Beneath the Stars. After the formalities of the gala had concluded, Alexander took Helen by the hand and led her onto a balcony. The night sky stretched above, full of bright stars. The cool breeze caressed her hair, and for a moment neither of them spoke. He leaned against the ornate railing, his gaze drifting over the sparkling city lights. Then he turned to her, his voice low. "Helen, I want to thank you for everything you've done. You've been there for me, believed in me, and help the company in ways I can't measure." She smiled softly. "It's part of my job, but even if it weren't, I still would have helped. I want to see you succeed." Alexander's expression softened with tenderness. He took her hand again and laced his fingers through hers. "I never expected that I would meet someone like you in my own company. You make me feel alive. You make me see the world in a different way." Her heart thudded against her chest. "I feel the same," she said, voice trembling. "You inspire me too. I care about you very much." The words hung between them, laced with vulnerability and hope. Before she could say more, Alexander leaned in. Slowly, carefully, he brushed his lips against hers. That kiss was soft at first, like a question. When Helen responded, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer. It felt like time stood still while the city below carried on, unaware of the magic taking place on that balcony. When they finally broke apart, she gazed into his eyes and saw both gratitude and longing. Warmth spread through her, blotting out any lingering fear of gossip or scandal. This moment was real, and it belonged to them alone. Chapter 9. After the passionate kiss. Their first kiss opened the door to a night that would be forever engraved in their memories. Alexander had a limousine waiting to take them home, but neither of them was ready to part ways. He gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Let me show you something," he said. He directed the driver to head to a nearby hill that overlooked the city. As they drove, Helen cuddled close to him, heart still fluttering from the kiss. Alexander reached into a small compartment and pulled out 2 champagne glasses and a chilled bottle he had stashed for a celebratory moment. It seemed he had planned to toast the successful gala, but now it felt more like a toast to them. They arrived at a secluded lookout point where city lights twinkled below. Stars winked above, and the hush of the night enveloped them in a world far from the crowds and cameras. They stepped out of the limousine, and he led her to a small clearing. He popped the champagne with a gentle twist, the cork flying softly into the bushes. He poured them each a glass, and they stood side by side, gazing at the view. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," he said, turning his eyes toward her. She sipped from her glass, the bubbles tickling her lips. "I loved every moment, even if it was a bit overwhelming, being in that crowd." He reached out, took her free hand, and pressed a light kiss on her knuckles. "If it ever gets too much, let me know. I don't want you to feel out of place." Helen looked down at their joined hands. "I feel safe with you," she admitted. "I'm just not used to all the attention." Alexander set his glass down and gently guided her face toward his. His voice was soft. "We can take this at your pace. I don't want you to ever think I'm pushing you into anything." She swallowed a lump in her throat. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. I've never been this close to someone like you, someone with so much influence and responsibility." His eyes shone with understanding. "I've never been this close to anyone quite like you either." He leaned in and kissed her again, more deeply this time. The taste of champagne lingered on his lips. She felt herself melt into him, the city lights below glowing in silent witness. When they finally pulled back, he caught her in a warm embrace. Together, they stood under the star-filled sky, wrapped in each other's arms, certain that this connection was something far more precious than anything money could buy. Chapter 10. An Unforgettable Night. The night seemed endless, filled with moonlit whispers and heart-thumping touches. The limo took them through winding roads, past quiet neighborhoods, until Alexander asked the driver to stop at a small lakeside park he remembered from his younger days. Under a canopy of trees, they wandered along a wooden pier, hand in hand. The water rippled softly beneath them, reflecting the silvery moonlight. Helen felt as if she had walked into a dream she never wanted to wake from. They stopped at the end of the pier. Gentle waves lapped against the wood. Alexander turned to face her, eyes glowing with affection. "I haven't been here for years," he said. "When I was younger, I used to come here to think, to dream of a better future." She looked around at the tranquil scene. "It's lovely, peaceful." He smiled a little. "Back then, I didn't have much, just hope and a willingness to work hard." Helen thought about the rumors of his humble beginnings, the uncertain stories of his family. She squeezed his hand, wanting him to feel that he was not alone. They sat down, their feet dangling over the edge of the pier. The water's reflection shimmered with the moon's glow, painting their silhouettes on the surface. Alexander slipped off his shoes and socks, playfully dipping his toes into the cool water. Helen giggled and followed suit, the chill sending a pleasant tingle up her legs. They sat there, laughing quietly about how the water felt, and sharing pieces of their past. She told him about her struggles with college tuition, how she had to work part-time jobs. He confided in her about his early days, living paycheck to paycheck before the breakthrough that built his empire. And in that quiet place, far from the grand ballrooms and demanding boardrooms, they found a closeness that words could not capture. Chapter 11. A Private World. As the night wore on, they decided to head back. Helen felt a pang of regret when the car rolled up to her small apartment building. She glanced at Alexander, unsure if she wanted the evening to end. He sensed her hesitation. Placing a gentle hand on her cheek, he asked softly, "Would you like to come with me to my home? I don't want this night to end, but I also respect whatever you're comfortable with." Heat rushed to her face. She hesitated, a mix of emotions swirling in her chest. She was not naive about what might happen if she said yes, but she also knew that her connection with him was genuine. After a moment, she gave a small nod. "I trust you," she said. His face lit up with relief and happiness. He leaned forward, pressed a tender kiss to her forehead, and then motioned for the driver to keep going. Chapter 12. At the Millionaire's estate. Alexander's home stood on a quiet, gated road. He lived in a sleek, modern estate that overlooked a gently sloping garden and a pool reflecting the night sky. Tall windows framed an elegant interior filled with clean lines and tasteful decor. It was impressive, but not ostentatious. Helen couldn't help but feel a little awed. It was one thing to hear about his wealth and see glimpses at the office, but it was another thing entirely to be here in his private sanctuary. He took her hand, leading her inside. Warm lights illuminated a spacious living area. The windows looked out onto a view of the sprawling city below. She noticed the subtle touches that made the house feel lived in. An open book on the coffee table, a pair of running shoes by the door, a half-empty glass of water left on a shelf. "It's beautiful," she said. "Very you." Alexander chuckled. "I like modern design, but I also like a place that feels like a home, not just a museum." She admired a painting on the wall, a serene landscape with rich, soothing colors. He explained it was painted by a local artist he had supported. The sincerity in his voice reinforced her belief that behind his grand accomplishments, he was a caring and thoughtful man. He guided her to the kitchen, where he poured 2 glasses of water. They sipped quietly, eyes lingering on each other. Tension crackled in the air, a blend of anticipation and tenderness. Chapter 13. The night deepens. Helen set her glass down on the counter. Her heart pounded as Alexander stepped closer. He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her. Her gaze locked onto his, and in that moment she saw an invitation in his eyes. She leaned forward, pressing her lips against his softly. He responded by slipping his arms around her waist, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, the world around them falling away. All her doubts faded under the warmth of his embrace. He took her hand and led her up a curved staircase to a softly lit corridor. At the end of the hallway, He opened a door to reveal a bedroom with tall windows that looked out onto the starry sky. The room was minimalistic, yet cozy cool, clean lines offset by plush bedding. They stood there together, silent for a moment, hearts beating in unison. Helen swallowed, nerves dancing in her stomach. "We don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," he said quietly. She looked into his eyes, grateful for his respect. "I want this," she whispered. "I want to be with you." In that whisper, she gave her heart to him fully, trusting him to hold it with care. He held her gaze a moment longer, as if memorizing every detail of her face, before kissing her once more, slowly and sweetly. Chapter 14. Morning Light. They woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the large windows, the city below waking to a new day. Helen stirred, blinking in the soft light. Reality settled in, and she felt a surge of warmth at the memory of the night before. Alexander was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with a gentle smile. He brushed a hand across her cheek. "Good morning," he said softly. She smiled back, feeling both shy and content. "Good morning." There was no rush to leave. He urged her to stay a bit longer, promising that they could arrive at the office later. She hesitated, worried about how it might look, but his calm reassurance soothed her. They ate a simple breakfast together in his kitchen, fresh fruit, toast, and coffee. The morning sun flooded the room with golden light, and she felt the promise of a day that could be filled with joy. But in the back of Alexander's mind, a secret still lurked. He wondered if the letter on his desk would eventually rise to the surface and fracture this new happiness he had found. For the moment, he pushed the thought aside. He wanted to cherish the present, the look of fondness in Helen's eyes. Chapter 15. Back to reality. Returning to work felt surreal. Helen tried to focus on her tasks as usual, but she noticed the knowing smiles of a few coworkers. Word traveled fast in an office environment, even if no one had proof of her relationship with Alexander. He continued to lead the company with the same strength and grace, but now there was an added brightness in his step. Whenever they passed each other, a small secret smile would pass between them, a silent acknowledgement of the closeness they shared. Despite the warmth of the relationship, a faint worry gnawed at Helen. Could this last? Could they keep their professional boundaries intact while exploring what they meant to each other? She tried to bury these doubts by focusing on her responsibilities. Meanwhile, Alexander prepared for an important shareholder meeting. He was also invited to speak at a tech conference out of state. The pressure mounted again, but this time, he had a partner in Helen, someone who understood him, someone he could open his heart to when the weight of leadership became too much. Chapter 16. The letter resurfaces. Late one evening, after a particularly stressful day, Alexander sat alone in his office. The memory of the letter weighed heavily on his mind. It had arrived anonymously, warning him that a damaging secret from his past was on the verge of surfacing. The letter demanded that he step down from certain negotiations or else risk full public exposure. Alexander had spent sleepless nights trying to figure out who was behind this. Could it be a business rival? Someone from his personal past holding a grudge? The threat was vague, yet it rattled him deeply. He stared at the envelope, the words etched in his mind. "I know what you did. If you don't back down, everyone else will too." It was cryptic, but it reminded him of an old mistake he had buried long ago. Something that could ruin his reputation if twisted in the wrong light. A part of him wanted to reveal it all to Helen, but another part feared losing her love if she found out the truth too soon. He locked the letter away in a drawer. His chest felt tight, dread gnawing at him. Outside, the lights of the city sparkled, but their brilliance did nothing to calm the storm in his heart. Chapter 17. A romantic escape. The following weekend, Alexander and Helen managed to slip away from the city. He suggested a quick trip to a private resort in the countryside, a place known for its quiet charm and rolling hills. They arrived late afternoon on a Friday, the sun casting a warm glow over the lush landscape. A cozy cottage awaited them, complete with a private terrace overlooking a field of wildflowers. Helen felt her breath catch in her throat at the sheer beauty of it. He showed her around, leading her through a narrow path that opened onto a view of a tranquil lake. Wild ducks floated near the shore, and a soft breeze rustled the tall grass. That night, they shared dinner by candlelight, away from the noise of the corporate world. They talked about favorite childhood memories, funny stories from school days, and dreams they still held in their hearts. Each revelation brought them closer, as if their souls were weaving together. After dinner, they walked hand in hand beneath the moonlight, the night air thick with the scent of jasmine. Helen's laughter drifted softly through the darkness as they told each other silly jokes, a comfortable closeness replacing any formality. In the cottage, the fireplace crackled gently, casting dancing shadows across the room. They cuddled on a plush sofa. Alexander's phone buzzed from time to time, but he silenced it, focusing instead on the woman beside him. Helen rested her head on his shoulder, exhaling a contented sigh. "This is perfect," she whispered. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I wish we could stay like this forever." Chapter 18. Hints of Suspense. Sunday morning came too soon. As they packed their bags, Helen noticed Alexander seemed restless. His phone beeped several times, and he excused himself to take calls outside. Faint lines of worry creased his brow, though he tried to hide them when he came back in. Helen reached for his hand. "Is everything okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. He hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Just work stuff. A few last-minute details about the upcoming conference." She could tell there was more to it, but she decided not to press him, hoping he would open up when he felt ready. On the drive back, the tension in him was palpable. She tried to ease it by talking about future marketing ideas and amusing weekend stories. But underneath, something was off. He dropped her off at her apartment, kissing her lovingly before she stepped out of the car. "Thank you for this weekend," he said. "It was everything I needed." She touched his cheek gently, searching his eyes. "You can tell me anything, you know." Alexander's gaze shifted away for a moment, as though wrestling with a decision. Then he met her eyes again and smiled. "I will, soon, I promise." Chapter 19. Cracks in the Armor. A few days later, at the office, Helen knocked on Alexander's door and found him staring out the window, his arms folded. A sense of tension radiated from him, filling the room with an uneasy energy. She closed the door behind her gently. "Alex, is something wrong?" He turned at the sound of her voice. For a moment, relief softened his features. "Helen," he murmured, crossing the room to take her hand. "I'm sorry if I've been distant. There's something I've been dealing with." She tilted her head, heart bracing itself. "You know you can trust me." He led her to the leather sofa in the corner. They sat, and he took a slow breath. "Someone is threatening to reveal certain details about my past. I don't know how they found out, or if they're just bluffing. But if this goes public, it could hurt my reputation. It could hurt the company." Helen's eyes widened. "What details?" Alexander swallowed. "Years ago, I was involved in an incident. I was young and desperate. I made a choice that could be seen as questionable, even though I believed it was for a good reason. If this letter is telling the truth, the person behind it could twist the facts and paint me as someone corrupt." Her stomach knotted. She covered his hand with hers. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He stared at the floor. "I was afraid you'd see me differently." Helen's eyes glimmered with compassion. "I'm not here to judge your past. I'm here because I care about you." He let out a shaky breath, and brought her into a tight embrace. For a few moments, they clung to each other, seeking solace. Chapter 20. Teaming Up. The revelation did not send Helen running. Instead, it drew her closer, fanning her protective instincts. She offered to help him figure out who might be behind the letter and how to counter the threat. Together, they brainstormed over late-night phone calls, discreetly contacting trusted friends who might have leads. Alexander's legal team also set out to investigate any possible blackmailers. Despite the strain, the bond between them grew stronger. Helen stood by him during stressful meetings, offering silent support with just a look. But as days turned into weeks, the tension built. No new letters came, yet the silence was equally unnerving. Alexander kept expecting another shoe to drop. His appetite waned, and he slept fitfully. Even when he found solace in Helen's arms, he could not rid himself of the worry that lingered in the back of his mind. Chapter 21. A Fragile Hope. Life kept moving. The tech conference loomed, and Alexander had to travel out of state to deliver a keynote speech. Helen accompanied him, not only as part of the marketing team but also as a silent fortress of emotional support. They arrived at a grand hotel hosting the event. Cameras flashed when he walked through the lobby, journalists eager for statements. Helen stayed slightly behind him, letting him shine in the spotlight, though she never felt too far away. The conference was a success. His speech drew standing ovations, and potential investors gathered around him, praising his innovative mind. Helen watched from the sidelines, pride filling her chest. He was more than just a millionaire CEO, was a visionary, a man she admired deeply. But that night, in their shared hotel suite, reality intruded again when Alexander's phone beeped with a new message from an unknown number. He tensed as he read it. The text was brief but chilling. "Tick-tock. Time is running out." Helen sat beside him, placing a hand on his arm. "We will find out who's doing this," she whispered, though her own heart thundered. Alexander glanced at her, eyes stormy with worry. He nodded, pulling her closer, as if bracing himself against a gathering tempest. Chapter 22. Tension Peaks. They returned home, where Alexander locked himself in his office for hours, making urgent calls. Helen tried her best to help, offering a listening ear. But as the threat lingered, she noticed a change in him. He became more restless, sometimes snapping at small things. Their sweet moments still happened, but the stress was driving a wedge between them in subtle ways. At times, she worried whether the secret would be too big for them to handle. She questioned if his past would drive them apart. Yet she stood firm, determined not to abandon him when he needed her most. Chapter 23. The Breaking Point. One stormy night, thunder rumbled outside as Helen made her way to Alexander's office. She could hear him talking on the phone, voice tense. She waited until he hung up, then entered softly. He was at his desk, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. She approached him cautiously, setting a cup of tea down. "Alexander." He let out a tired sigh, pushing a stack of documents aside. "I'm sorry. I've been neglecting you." She shook her head. "You're doing what you have to do. But I'm worried about you. Maybe you should tell me everything about this secret from your past." He hesitated, then stood, walking to the window. Rain streaked down the glass, blurring the city lights. After a moment, he began to speak. "It was about 10 years ago," he said in a low voice. "I was fresh out of school, trying to launch my first startup. I was struggling to pay rent, my mother was sick, and I needed money for her care. I faked some financial data to secure a small investment. It was enough to get us started, and my mother got the treatment she needed. By the time we were successful, I paid back the funds with interest. No one got hurt, or so I thought." If that comes out, if the investors learn I manipulated figures back then, it could turn into a nightmare." He looked at Helen with haunted eyes. "I've spent years trying to move past it. I never did it again. I worked hard to make everything legitimate. But if the media gets hold of this story, they'll tear it apart. People will doubt all my achievements. The board might lose faith in me." Helen let the words sink in. She felt a wave of relief that it was not something worse, but also an ache in her chest for the pain he was carrying. She closed the distance between them and reached for his hand. "You did it for your mother to help her. That doesn't make it right, but it doesn't make you a monster. People make mistakes. You tried to fix it." He exhaled shakily, tears shining in his eyes. "I've never told anyone else. I was afraid it would ruin everything. But now someone out there knows, and they're threatening to expose me." Helen held him tight, pressing her face against his shoulder as the thunder boomed outside. "We'll face this together," she promised. "We'll be honest if we have to. You won't go through this alone." Chapter 24. Love and Resolve. Knowing the full truth strengthened Helen's resolve to stand by Alexander. She urged him to consider controlling the narrative before it was too late, perhaps, by confessing to his board privately and showing the steps he had taken to rectify the situation. It was a risky move, but better than letting some anonymous person hold the power. Alexander took her advice to heart. With her support, he arranged a confidential meeting with the board members he trusted most, planning to reveal his past misstep and explain how it had no bearing on the current standing of the company. The night before the meeting, he could hardly sleep, but Helen stayed by his side. They talked about everything from possible fallout to crisis management strategies. When dawn broke, he held her close, drawing strength from her presence. "You're my anchor," he whispered. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you for believing in me." She smiled, kissing him softly. "Just keep being the man you are. That's enough." Chapter 25. The Confession. Alexander walked into the boardroom with Helen at his side, though she waited just outside as he spoke to the members alone. He took a deep breath and recounted the story, not sparing himself from blame. Some members looked shocked, others thoughtful. A tense hush filled the room. When he finished, the room stayed silent for a moment. Then an older board member, who had been with the company for a long time, spoke up. "Alexander, we've seen your integrity over the years. You pulled this company from the brink of ruin more than once. If you say this was a mistake of youth, I believe you. What matters now is how we handle it." Another member chimed in. "We cannot ignore this, but we also cannot pretend all your achievements are null. This is delicate, but I, for one, stand by you." A wave of relief swept through Alexander. Not everyone was fully at ease. Some expressed concern about public perception if the secret got out. But they agreed to show unity, acknowledging that his actions had been a single mistake long ago, corrected before it harmed anyone. When Alexander emerged from the meeting, Helen saw the mixture of relief and lingering worry in his eyes. She embraced him quietly. The partial weight had lifted, but the final test would come if and when the threat tried to go public. Chapter 26. Tense. Days passed. No new messages arrived from the mysterious blackmailer. The board stood prepared to address any media storm if the secret came to light. Alexander felt lighter than before, as if some part of his burden had been lifted by his confession. He still had to grapple with his own guilt, but Helen's steady presence soothed him. They spent quiet evenings at his estate or her apartment, watching movies and cooking simple meals. In those moments it felt like they were an ordinary couple, just two people in love. Yet the suspense lingered. Any day, any hour, the bomb could drop. The letter had promised an exposure, and the text message threatened a ticking clock. Alexander's investigators worked tirelessly, but the culprit stayed hidden. Chapter 27. The final confrontation. One late afternoon, as Helen was leaving the office, she heard a commotion from the main lobby. Curiosity pricked at her, and she hurried to see what was happening. She found Alexander facing a stranger, a tall figure wearing a hooded sweatshirt, clutching a folder of papers. Security guards were already moving in, but Alexander held up a hand. "Let him speak," he commanded. Helen watched from behind a column, anxiety twisting in her gut. The stranger peeled back his hood, revealing a face worn by bitterness and anger. He waved the folder. "I have proof of your past lies, right? I told you to back off those deals, but you ignored me." Alexander's jaw tightened. "So it's you." The man sneered. "I was one of your early competitors. You got the funding that should have been mine. I lost everything. Then I found out how you tricked the investors. I wanted to see you pay." Alexander's security detail stepped forward, but Alexander gestured for them to hold still. He looked the man in the eye. "I made a mistake, and I made it right. You can try to twist that story all you want, but I've come clean to the board, and I've repaid every cent long ago. If you need proof, I can give it to you." The stranger's face contorted with disbelief. "You think that'll stop me from ruining you?" Alexander's voice was steady, though tension rippled beneath the surface. "I can't change the past. If you want to expose me, do it, but know that I'll stand by the truth. And if you truly lost everything, I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone else to be hurt." For a moment, the man's anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Then he whipped around and stormed out, leaving the folder behind. Security followed him until he disappeared into the street crowd. Helen stepped forward and touched Alexander's arm. He turned toward her, exhaling a shaky breath. The entire lobby was watching, some employees frozen in shock. His gaze met hers. A silent understanding passed between them. The threat was real, but the worst of it might have passed. He had faced the man behind the letters head-on. Chapter 28. The Aftermath. The next few days were tense. The man did try to leak the story online, but Alexander's preemptive disclosure to the board and immediate honesty with investors undercut the impact. Some negative headlines appeared, but they were met with official statements clarifying the timeline and resolution of the past mistake. To everyone's surprise, the story lost traction quickly. Alexander's personal brand of integrity and the unwavering loyalty of his board members turned the tide in his favor. Public opinion leaned toward sympathy, a youthful error, long since corrected. When it became clear the man's campaign against Alexander had failed, he vanished from the spotlight. Legal teams took action in case he surfaced again, but for now, the crisis subsided. Through it all, Helen never wavered. She stood by Alexander, offering comfort when the weight seemed too much. Their love, once private and untested, had now proven strong enough to face a genuine threat. Chapter 29. The Quiet Celebration. In the quiet aftermath, Alexander took Helen to the small lakeside park, where they had once dipped their feet in the water under moonlight. This time, he brought a basket of simple food sandwiches, fruit, and a flask of tea. They sat on the pier, watching the sun set in a blaze of oranges and pinks. Helen leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. He wrapped an arm around her waist. "I can't believe everything we went through. It feels surreal." She nodded, eyes fixed on the water's gentle ripples. "But we came out stronger." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. "I meant what I said before. You're my anchor, Helen. I'm so thankful you've been here with me." She turned her face up to his, a warm smile lighting her features. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Chapter 30. Renewed Promises. With the crisis behind them, their relationship moved forward without the weight of secrets. Alexander no longer worried about what Helen might think if she found out the truth she already knew, and she still loved him. They spent more time together openly, though they kept a respectful balance at work. Everyone in the company seemed to understand there was something more than a standard boss-employee dynamic. But there was little gossip because Alexander treated Helen as a respected colleague. One weekend, he invited her to another trip, this time to a coastal town where the air was filled with the scent of salt and sea. They walked along the shore, hand in hand, waves lapping at their feet. Children played nearby, chasing each other with kites. A gentle breeze wove through Helen's hair as she laughed at the foam swirling around her ankles. At a quiet cove, they set down a blanket. Alexander gazed at her with tender eyes, as though every moment spent with her was a gift. She lay back against the soft sand, resting her head on his shoulder, the sky a brilliant blue dome overhead. It was in this simple setting, just sand, water, and sky, that he gently turned her face toward his and whispered, "Helen, I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you move in with me?" Her lips parted in surprise. For a moment her heart pounded. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. "Yes," she replied, tears of joy gathering in her eyes. "I will." He pulled her into an embrace, their laughter mingling with the sound of the rolling surf. She could hardly believe how far they had come from a shy smile by the elevator to a deep, committed love. Chapter 31. A new chapter. Moving in together felt like the most natural step. Her belongings merged with his, and while the estate was grand, Helen brought a warmth and personal touch to each room, framed photos of them together, fresh flowers on the dining table, cozy blankets on the couch. Mornings turned into a shared routine of coffee in the sunlit kitchen, and evenings became a time of laughter, watching movies or reading books side by side. Despite the differences in their backgrounds, their lives fit together like puzzle pieces. Work was busy as always, but they navigated it with renewed enthusiasm. Helen's marketing campaigns gained traction, while Alexander guided the company through new innovations. Their teamwork at work mirrored the synergy they found in private. Chapter 32. A light in the darkness. One night, while cuddled on the couch watching a classic film, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, an unknown number. Helen felt him tense as he answered. "Hello?" he said warily. She could tell he was bracing himself for another threat, but his posture relaxed after a moment. He ended the call quickly, a slight smile touching his lips. "It was my investigator," he explained. "They found the man who was blackmailing me. He's left the city, probably for good. There's no sign he plans to bother us again." Helen felt a wave of relief. "So it's really over?" He nodded. "It seems so." She hugged him, resting her head against his chest. Thunderous burdens that once seemed unstoppable had passed, leaving them stronger and freer. Chapter 33. Dreams take flight. Weeks melted into months. Alexander's company flourished, and Helen's role expanded. She began overseeing larger projects, her talent recognized by senior management. They talked about how to handle the next phase of growth without overshadowing their personal relationship. In the midst of busy schedules, they still made time for late-night walks, candlelit dinners at home, and weekend getaways. They learned each other's quirks. She left cupboard doors half open. She always forgot to charge her phone. These small annoyances became jokes rather than fights, proof that love doesn't require perfection. Chapter 34. The final suspense. Though the blackmail crisis had ended, one lingering fear remained in Alexander's mind. He worried about the day he might propose to Helen. A question of whether she truly wanted to be tied to his world of constant scrutiny and public attention sometimes kept him up at night. He sought the advice of a close friend, who told him that he should do what felt right, trusting Helen's love. So Alexander decided he would take her back to the place where they had first felt a magical closeness, the lakeside park where they had dangled their feet in the water, discussing life's hopes. Helen arrived that evening, invited by Alexander to a special date. She found him waiting at the edge of the water, candles flickering around the pier. Soft music played from a small speaker, blending with the tranquil sounds of nature. Her heart rate quickened as she approached him. The night air was mild, and the reflection of the moon danced on the surface of the lake. He took her hands in his, gazing at her with a mixture of adoration and nervous anticipation. "Helen," he began, voice trembling slightly, "I brought you here because this place means so much to us. It's where I first felt that you truly understood me, where we bonded in a way I had never experienced before." He took a shaky breath. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring simple yet elegant, sparkling in the moonlight. Helen's eyes filled with tears. She felt her breath catch, emotion overwhelming her. "Helen Carter," Alexander said, dropping to one knee. "You brought light to my life, stood by me in the darkest times, and loved me without conditions. I can't imagine the future without you. Will you marry me?" Chapter 35. A Happy Ending. Time seemed to stand still. Helen gazed at the man kneeling before her, remembering all they had gone through, the uncertainties, the trials. She saw in him not just a CEO or a millionaire, but the person who captured her heart through kindness and courage. "Yes," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "Yes, I'll marry you." A radiant smile broke across his face. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to wrap her in a tight embrace. They kissed under the moonlight, their souls igniting like the stars above. In that moment, the shadows of fear, doubts, and secrets melted away, leaving them with the bright promise of a new life together. It was a future built on understanding, perseverance, and above all, love. Epilogue. The next spring, in a garden filled with blooming flowers, they stood before friends, family, and colleagues, exchanging vows that spoke of loyalty, respect, and endless devotion. Helen's smile glowed brighter than any floral arrangement, and Alexander's eyes shone with gratitude and joy. As they sealed their promises with a tender kiss, applause erupted, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of roses through the air. Together, they walked hand in hand down the aisle, ready to meet the world with hearts full of hope. Their story was proof that even a world of wealth and corporate power could not overshadow the simple, profound force of true love. Through every challenge, every hidden secret, and every leap of faith, they discovered that what mattered most was the bond they shared, a bond that would guide them through every triumph and trial life had yet to bring. And so it was that after a passionate kiss, a millionaire CEO and his lover embarked on a night of unforgettable romance, one that turned into a lifetime of happiness, side by side.